Alright guys, here are the notes for the quadratic formula. I'm not going to do every single problem on here, but I will do a lot of them so that you can get some extra practice. Hopefully this will be in addition. So we've got the quadratic formula. We're basically trying to figure out what two math terms multiply to give you that trinomial. We've done factoring with the x, so in a class we changed that to negative 18. Make the big X, we have our A times our C up here, our B here. We know that our A is the number in front of the x squared. It does not include the x squared. It's the number in front of the x squared. So that in this case would be 1. B would be the number. So if this is our ax squared plus bx plus c. B would be 7. C would be negative 18. So when we're taking our A times our C, A times C would be negative 18. 1 times negative 18 is negative 18. The B is 7. Positive 7. We know that we need to multiply two numbers together to get 18 and add them to get positive 7. Since this is a negative, we know that one of the numbers has to be negative, the other one's going to be positive. Since the B value is positive, we know the bigger value is going to be positive. So we ask ourselves, what numbers multiply to give us 18? We've got 1 and 18, 2 and 9, 3 and 6. So of these factors, they all multiply to give us negative, or can, if one of them is a negative, multiply to give us 18. Which of those would add to give us 7 if one was positive and one was negative? Well, we notice that 2 and 9, so negative 2 and positive 9. This is always going to have the sign of the bigger number. So if this is positive, the bigger number is going to be positive. If it's negative, the bigger number is going to be negative. So from there, we take our two factors. We say x minus 2 times x plus 9 equals 0. Basically, this is telling us if we multiply this times this, we would get this trinomial. Then we know by the zero product property that one of these have to be 0. So in order for this term to have to be 0, we would set that equal to 0 and add 2 to both sides and get x by ourselves, so x would equal positive 2. If this one were to equal 0, we have x plus 9 equals 0. Subtract 9 from both sides. X equals negative 9. Okay, so our answer is going to be that x equals either positive 2 or negative 9. These are your answers. This is your solutions, your roots, your x-intercept, all of these things. And if you graph it in your calculator, you will see that x squared plus 7x minus 18, if I were to graph that, that would be my table. If I were to graph it, my solutions, my roots, my x-intercepts would be at positive 2 and negative 9. So that's what we're talking about here. Where does this parabola, shown by this quadratic, across the x-axis, and that is at positive 2 and negative 9. Okay, so now that's using the factoring. If we're going to use the quadratic formula, we do the same thing. We figure out what is our A value, 1. What is our B value? We're going to go ahead and change this to 18 as well. B value would be 7, C value would be negative 18. But now I'm basically going to take this formula and plug in the values in this equation into this formula. So for my B, I'm going to have x equals, B is 7. So I'm going to put down negative, and instead of B, I'm going to put 7 plus or minus the square root of B squared. And instead of B, I'm going to plug in my 7. 7 squared minus 4 times the A value. My A value is 1. Times my C value. My C value is negative 18. So I can basically put that in my calculator and type in 7 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 18. And I'm going to get, ooh, I forgot to finish the formula. 2 over A. Okay, so, sorry, I forgot to finish that formula. Negative 7 plus or minus the square root, and I put this whole part in and got 121 divided by 2. 2 times 1 is 2. Okay, so the square root of 121, I know, is 11. I'm going to plug that in my calculator, and I'm going to get negative 7 plus or minus 11 divided by 2. So now we can split this into two problems, because here's where you're not going to get the same answer regardless. I have to divide this into two separate problems. Negative 7 plus 11 divided by 2, and negative 7 minus 11 divided by 2. Okay, so negative 7 plus 11 divided by 2 is going to give me 4 divided by 2, which equals 2. Negative 7 minus 11 divided by 2 is going to give me negative 18 divided by 2, which equals negative 9. So we get the same answers both ways. This is the same answer, so my x will equal 2 or negative 9. It's the same as we got up here. This is just two different ways of working out the same problem. Now, you can use either way to work out a trinomial. However, sometimes you're not going to get nice whole numbers. Alright, so this is where whenever you can always use the quadratic formula, but sometimes you cannot factor it with this method because we would get prime. So for an example, if we had used the original equation of x squared plus 7x minus 14, we would have said, all right, what numbers multiply? My A is 1, my B is 7, my C is negative 14. What two numbers multiply to give me negative 14 and add to give me positive 7? Well, my factors of 14 are 1 and 14 and 2 and 7. neither one of those are going to fit this bill. So we would basically call this prime. However, we would be able to work this out using the quadratic formula. We would get a number that is not a whole number. All right? So let's work a couple of these problems. I'm not going to work them all. This one is my A value would be 1, my B value would be -5, my C value would be -24. So I'm going to plug that into my quadratic formula, which is -b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac divided by 2a. So here I'm going to plug my -5 in for my b. Negative of a -5 is going to give me a +5 plus or minus the square root of -5 squared minus 4 times your a, which is 1, times -24, all over 2 times 1. This is what your x would equal. You're looking for your roots, solutions, your x-intercept, your zeros, all the same. Okay? Now you just literally just do the math here. You've got 5, that's a big old plus sign. You've got 5 plus or minus negative, just gonna take that out, that looks huge. Plus or minus the square root, -5 times -5 is 25, minus 4 times -24 is going to give me a positive, and I get 4 times 24, 96, divided by 2. So 25 plus 96, I get 5 plus or minus the square root of 121 divided by 2. That's going to basically give me 5 plus or minus 11 divided by 2. Then we can split that into 5 plus 11 divided by 2 and 5 minus 11 divided by 2. 5 plus 11 divided by 2 is 16 divided by 2, which equals 8. 5 minus 11 divided by 2 is -6 divided by 2, which equals -3. So here are your solutions. So x would equal either -3 or 8. Okay. Here, now we've got a situation where our a is negative. So you need to remember that your a value must always be positive. So in order to take care of that, we need to multiply the whole problem by -1. That's going to effectively change all of our signs. We don't care if b is negative. We do care if a is negative. The only time we do this is if a is negative. So when I multiply everything by -1, I get x squared plus 8x plus 16 equals 0. So now from here, I can plug this into my quadratic formula. So using my quadratic formula, I've got my a equals 1, b equals 8, C equals 16. So, when I plug that in, my B, negative 8, x is going to equal negative 8 plus or minus the square root of 8 squared minus 4 times 1 times 16 all over 2 times 1. So I get, if I'm just working on what's in my radical, in my discriminant, 8 squared minus 4 times 16 times 1, if you want to make it be completely perfectly accurate. And you're going to get 0. Because I've got negative 8 plus or minus 64 minus 64 all over 2. So that's going to equal negative 8 plus or minus 0 divided by 2. So that, if you work that into two problems, you would have negative 8 plus 0 divided by 2, which equals negative 4, or negative 8 minus 0 divided by 2, which is also going to equal negative 4. You're going to end up with one answer. Okay? Alright, so moving on down, we're going to work these two problems. Now, remember that another thing, you must have your equation equal to 0. That is very important. So in this situation, it's not, we do have a positive a, but we don't have an equation equal to 0. So in order to do that, we've got to move this 4 to the other side. So we're going to subtract 4 from both sides. And we're going to end up with 3m squared plus 5m minus 38 minus 4 is 42. And that's going to equal 0. So now I have a positive a and equal to 0. So my a value is 3, my b value is 5, my c value is negative 42. So I'm going to plug that into my quadratic equation, which is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Alright, then now we plug everything in. So I'm going to plug in x equals b negative 5 plus or minus the square root of 5 squared is 25 minus 4 times 3 times negative 42. If I plug that into my, all over, now it's not over 2, it's over 2 times 3. Because I have an a value here that's not 1. Alright, so I'm going to have negative 5 plus or minus the square root of, and if I plug in my calculator, 25 minus 4 times 3 times negative 42, I'm going to get positive 529 divided by 2 times 3 is 6. Alright? So now if I take the square root, that's awfully long. If I take the square root of 529, I get square root of 529 is 23. So negative 5 plus or minus 23 divided by 6. Now I can split that into two equations. Negative 5 plus 23 divided by 6, and negative 5 minus 23 divided by 6. Negative 5 plus 23 divided by is going to give me 18 divided by 6, which is 3. Negative 5 minus 23 divided by 6 is negative 28 divided by 6. And that's I can reduce that by 2 and end up with negative 14 divided by 3. So x is going to equal either 3 or negative 14 over 3. That's how you do that. Alright, this one's kind of different because there is something special about this. Number one, they don't equal 0. So I need to add 2 to both sides. And I'm going to end up with 7x squared minus 9 equals 0. So now I've got a positive a and equal to 0. My a value is 7. My b value is non-existent. So my b is actually 0. And my c value is negative 9. So I'm going to use the quadratic formula just the same as I did above, except for b is going to equal 0. So I'm going to get x equals 0, negative 0, which is 0, plus or minus the square root of 0 squared minus 4 times 7 times negative 9, all over 2 times 7. So when I work that out, I get 0, so I'm left with just plus or minus the square root. 0 squared is 0. Negative 4 times 7 times negative 9 is 252 over 2 times 7 is 14. So here is what I'm left with. Now, this is something that can be simplified further. And you probably on a multiple choice test will not be given this as an answer choice. So you're going to have to take that and simplify it. So you've got plus or minus the square root of 252 divided by 14. I'm going to take this square root of 252 and simplify it. What two numbers multiply to give me 252? I'm going to do it the long way, but the short way would be that you'd say, all right, y equals, Claire, 252 divided by x. Go to your table, and I would look for a perfect square, and look at there's 7 and 36. I know 36 is a perfect square, so I can change this into 7 times 36. Then I know I can break this down into 6 times 6, and I can circle my couple and box up my single, and I end up, my circle comes out, my box stays in, so I am left with 6 square root of 7. divided by 14. But I'm not done, because I can reduce this even further. 2 goes into both that 3 times, and 2 goes into 14 7 times. So the answer is actually plus or minus, here, plus or minus 3 square root of 7 divided by 7. This is your final answer. This would be the multiple choice answer that would be given. So make sure that you know if you have a radical that can be reduced, it needs to be simplified and then reduced in a fraction form. Alright, let's work on some. That's a difficult one, but it's not too hard for you guys. You're smart. Here are a couple of special cases. So we've got, let's work this one. I think I worked this one incorrectly in class. So let's work this one so that you guys have the correct way of doing this. I think I forgot that this has a negative 5 over here, and I did not set it equal to 0. So the first thing you're going to want to do is add 5 and add 5 to both sides. And you get 4x squared minus x plus 3 equals 0. So in your notes, make sure that you understand that I think I gave the wrong answer to this, so that here's the correct way to do this. So then I've got my A equals 4, my B equals -1, and my C equals 3. So if I'm plugging that into my quadratic formula, I know that I've got here negative B plus or minus square root B squared minus 4AC over 2 times A. Alright, then I'm going to plug in my negative B. A negative of a negative is a positive, so 1 plus or minus my B square root. My -1 squared would be +1 minus 4 times A, which is 4, times C, which is 3, all over 2 times 4. So this is my x equals. So if I plug that into my calculator, I'm going to say 1 minus 4 times 3 equals 1 plus or minus -47 divided by 4 times 2 is 8. This, you cannot have a negative in your radical, so this would be no solution. Okay, now if I were to put this in my calculator, y equals, and plug this in, 4x squared, 4x squared minus x plus 3, and graft it. I keep doing that. Graft it. This is why your answer is no solution, because it never does not cross your x-axis. That's why there's no solution. Okay? So, if your discriminant, which is what's underneath your radical, has negative, it's no solution. If it's positive, then you'll have two solutions. If your discriminant equals 0, which we had a situation where it equaled 0 on the other side, then there's going to only be one solution. Okay? Hopefully that helps. I'll do it in another video with the homework.